Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Alright, let's get one thing straight here that isn't me. This is just an appreciation post on this fan album and why it has become my favorite everywhere at the end of time album. So don't really expect some Pat Chennington level of psychoanalysis. I'm not going to analyze the colors of the album covers because colors are for nerds. I'm only a doll, I can only take so much. You don't even know how stressful it is. Today I'll be talking about my views on my favorite fan album and trying to make sense of what I can. I'll be talking about an album whose creator has been part of many popular fan projects, but their works don't get enough recognition as they truly deserve. In that album, The Artifex's The Grand Decline. And I'm just gonna say this, if Everywhere at the End of Time broke you, this album will demolish your entire existence. Oh, and another thing, I'm not good with words. They don't process well in my little doll head. So if I get something wrong about this album, sorry. I have not done something like this before, so please forgive me if my voice sounds monotone. Just a little warning before we start. This album covers pretty heavy topics such as dementia and depression. So if you're not in a good place right now, maybe save this video for a later time. There's no shame in clicking off this video. We all have our limits. It's fine. Here I have a live reaction of me listening to it.
Das Herzenswunder.
If you're not aware of The Grand Decline, I don't know why you aren't. It has its own Sporkle quiz. Who are playing The Grand Decline Sporkle quiz? If people are making quizzes for The Grand Decline, can someone make a BuzzFeed quiz on what The Grand Decline visit are you? Based on your subway order will determine what the Grand Decline visit you are. Can someone please make that? That would be so funny. I was going to save this video for when the entire album was finished, but I just couldn't wait. The Grand Decline plans to be a 32-part album split into 8 sections. As of today, 18 of those 32 parts have been released, and I'll be going over each part in this video. So my plan for this is to review the first 18 parts, or as the Artifex points it to be Act 1, in this video, and when the album is fully finished, I'll make another video reviewing the rest. So before I get into The Grand Decline, let's talk about its inspiration. I'm going to be talking about Everywhere at the End of Time first, so for those who already know this, skip ahead to this timestamp. But for those who don't know, Everywhere at the End of Time is a 6.5 hour long album made by The Caretaker with James Layton Kirby and Ivan Seal, depicting what it's like to go through the different stages of dementia, with music becoming more distant and broken as each stage progresses. I won't go too much into detail about Everywhere at the End of Time since we're focusing on a different album. You can just look up another video better explaining it, like Pat Chennington, A Bucket of Jake, or The Digital Saloon. But just as a summarization, this album completely broke the internet, with people creating TikTok challenges about listening to it, changing people's views on how to treasure the littlest of moments, and sparked the creation of an entire fan community creating their own renditions of the album in their own way and adding their own spin to it. Now let's get into who made the album. The Grand Decline is a solo person project made by the Artifex, otherwise known as Phi Sigma. Phi Sigma is a popular member in the Caretaker fan project community and is known for creating the cover art for fan projects such as Forevermore and Nevermore, Everywhere in the Beginning of Nowhere, North Millennium Space Redux, other great albums you should listen to, and so much more. The Caretaker community strives to create various fan projects that resemble similar aspects to Everywhere at the End of Time. Fan projects made by Caretaker fans, for Caretaker fans. Phi Sigma has made other albums inspired by works of the Caretaker, such as The Forgotten Alleyway, which took inspiration from the Caretaker's Patience, with the continuation Beyond the Forgotten Holiday being a fan project of the Caretaker's Extra Patience. The Grand Decline was heavily inspired by Everywhere at the End of Time, and Phi Sigma aimed to recreate this experience but with a wider sample range and more in-depth on the condition. As with Everywhere at the End of Time, most of the samples range from 1920s to 1940s ballroom music. But with the Grand Decline, it starts off with samples from 1920s to 1940s for the first few parts, but samples more modern songs from the 70s to 90s as you get further into the album. With the album beginning its journey on August 26, 2021, going on until this day. And if you can't tell, I'm just reading the Caretaker wiki for this album, which I know has quite the lack of effort put into it. You're welcome, Phi Sigma. Now that we have all that out of the way, let's finally get into the Grand Decline, starting with Scene 1, The Unaware Bliss. Before the eventual down spiral, we experience the very beginning of the decline, a time where thoughts are recollected without effort. Savor this bliss, for it may not last long. Visit When is where our journey begins. Happy moments are treasured with very little to no distortion, with track names intending this bliss is only temporary, such as Days Long Gone, Times We'll Never Forget, and My Love for You Shall Never Die. The artwork for Visit One depicts a brown vase upon a cheery yellow background. My guess on what this cover art is supposed to represent is that it is a precious family heirloom that the patient has kept for most of their life. One thing I appreciate in Visit One is the change in moods between songs. In Everywhere at the End of Time fan projects, you usually hear all happy memories in the first stage, but the Artifex gives a more realistic vibe with this visit by showing a mix of emotions. When I listen to Visit One, I imagine the patient telling stories about their life and good memories with their family. This visit starts off very cheerful and bright, but becomes more confused and distant with the last two tracks, Times We'll Never Forget and My Love for You Shall Never Die. It is the final days before confusion and worry rolls in. Visit One has an amazing first song that hooks the listener into looking further into the album. With other Caretaker fan projects, the first song is usually the most blissful and peaceful song in the album. It's just a burning memory of the fan album. But the Grand Decline's opening track uses a grand orchestra that lets you know this album is unlike any other. This visit does a great job at setting the scene for what our patient has remembered throughout their life, feeling as if the patient is having fond memories with their family before things start to take a turn. And I guess this is not the only version of Visit One I'll be talking about, because Phi Sigma is working on a remake of Scene 1, with only Visit One of the remake being out at the time of me recording this. So let's get into this, I guess. The remake introduces new songs and redos of the songs that were in the original, with new tracks such as From Peripheral Vision and Never Leave My Sight. I'm not really that big of a fan of the remake so far. Some of the songs in the original were fine the way they were, with Days Long Gone being innocent and cheerful in the original, but the remake makes it sound limited with an unnerving atmosphere. The remake also removed Times Will Never Forget and replaced it with Never Leave My Sight. Times Will Never Forget is a good introduction of memories beginning to show their age. I'm not a fan of when Everywhere at the End of Time fan projects make stage 1 all cheerful memories. Having variety in the emotions of the songs makes it sound more realistic and human. Having songs like this makes fan projects bland, preventing them from sticking out from other albums. Visit 2 is where the first signs of confusion begin to show, with songs taking a more mysterious turn compared to the last visit. With song titles such as Dance in the Rain a While, The Past Calls Back Faintly, and Sudden Displacement, the patient now has a faint recollection of their past compared to the first visit. They start forgetting where things are placed, such as house keys and small items. Sudden misplacement of objects is usually the first sign of dementia, with the patient forgetting slight things but don't want to draw attention to the fact. With the track, The Past Calls Back Faintly, we see that the patient's memories have taken a step back and become more faint to the patient. The song is distant but still recognizable to hear. The artwork for Visit 2 shows a weird vase with the blue and purple flowers erupting from the vase. I would say this cover art represents the patient's mind. As you can see, the branches represent the spinal cord connecting the brain. The brain appears to be fuzzy, showing that the patient's memories begin to become blurry. Visit 3 is the increasing attempts to stay happy and glad, with the patient denying something is wrong. With track 4, old ringing stadium tunes, starting off with the joyous carnival theme is slowly becoming more slow and low mood at the end. When I hear this visit, I see the patient out with a drink, or maybe a smoke, with a close member, talking about the stage shows they went when they were younger, but the patient is starting to forget some details. The sixth because as we know, the grandeur shall inevitably erode, for nothing can last forever. Me feel uneasy with its increasing echoes and unnerving instruments. The album art is a bottle with a cigarette bowl next to it. This gives me the feel of catching up with an old friend or family member before the mind finally begins to give away. Because as we know, the grandeur shall inevitably erode, for nothing can last forever. Here, we see memories and thought processes begin to become more muddy as Alzheimer's begins to take a toll on the cortex of mind. We may also see the grief of one's own condition progress further along towards the path of acceptance. Memories are still relatively clear in this part, but the worst is still yet to come. In Visit 4, we see an increase in music quality with the change in sample range, with the vinyl crackling in each track being very limited. Visit 4 is the increasing attempts to feel the sense of joy they once felt. Tracks like an unsaid rhythm down below, trying to remember the sensation of Visit 2, but to no avail as the memory begins to become clouded. The track names in this visit become more about the emotions of the memories instead of the memories themselves, such as despair shatters what remains of hope, fragments of joy caught in the mist, and festivities give way to stagnant bliss. As with many fan albums, this is the point where they show deterioration with increased vinyl crackling. But instead of that, the Artifex chooses to go with the deterioration of the music first. In the track Fragments of Joy Caught in the Mist, the song plays what it can of a memory, only to be interrupted by loud blaring trumpets, only to start again. I'm not sure what the album art is. Seems like a platform you would use when tying your shoes. And if we're going with my guess, then that would be the shoelace. The lace is worn and destroyed. A deteriorated shell of what it once was, like our patient.
Now then, business, Melanie. What did Lord Shear say to you last night?
Not very much, but you are very ardent.
Visit 5 is where reality begins to become dreamlike for the patient. The patient still has fond memories of their past and are still aware of who they are. The track names show the patient's calmer and peaceful moments, yearning for the life of a time much simpler, such as the clouds begin to darken, a calm reminiscence in dark times, and dreams of better days. What really caught my attention with this visit was the first song, What Stars May Fade. It is a conversation with the wedding arranger and the soon-to-be bride. The bride is being forced to marry someone she doesn't love. I imagine this is a meaningful moment in the patient's life about their wedding.
When he proposes, you will accept him.
When may I love somebody, please?
Not until you are safely married, and then only with the greatest discretion.
I see.
What is the matter?
It doesn't feel like my birthday anymore.
The album cover is a window held up by a wire over a pile of coal. The curtains in front of the window are beginning to close, shutting away the time and memories of simpler times back then. Visit 6 is the patient's memories beginning to lose meaning and lose the emotions the patient has held on for so long. It has a very melancholic feel, with the songs attempting to play a happy and peaceful tune, but losing away at what made them memorable to begin with song titles being depressing that there are little to no happy memories left, such as Skies Continue to Fade, Into a Bitter Descent, and Approaching the Edge of Pitfall. The tracks feel empty and barren. The patient is losing what their memories felt like. They can replay these memories without effort, but is drained of the sensation it felt in that moment. The album art of Visit 6 is a weirdly shaped vase of flowers with a very grayscale color. This cover accurately fits the role in feeling empty, with all the colors drained out of it. leaving a hollow film of what once was. One thing that put me off was the 15-second tune that played not only once, but twice during this visit at the beginning and end. This melody is very mysterious, but elegant in a way that is placed throughout Visit 6. Visit 7 is the deterioration of Visit 6, with the songs feeling as if they lost meaning to the patient. The tracks in this visit being as broken and as distant as it sounds, like Hidden by the Ever-Present Fog, Marching Down Broken Lanes, and Reaching into the Drifting Past. Songs feel broken and empty, like there's something missing to them, but you can't put your mind on what it is. For example, the fourth song, A Cold Evening Night, you feel as if the song is missing the main part, the happiness that made it memorable. Without it, the song feels empty and off touch. With track 3, Feelings of Doubt Wash Over, it attempts to play a happy and blissful tune, but it is anything but. The song, although upbeat, it feels empty and hollow, a false moment of bliss, if you will. I believe Visit 6 and Visit 7 are an amazing duo that go so well with each other. Going from depressing tones to emptiness of what made the memory what it was is an amazing continuation. It leaves me wondering what will happen next after all the memories lose meaning. The album art of Visit 7 is a mirror leading into a dark abyss. This is most likely the patient's last moments of remembrance before total deterioration. A glimpse into the chaos of what is to come for the patient. As the patient has slowly begun to accept their fate, they begin to wander down towards a deep and steep depression. A world-shattering truth cements this fact. Thoughts begin to overlap and cancel themselves out entirely at this point. The 5 senses may also start to fail, however the patient is still relatively healthy, yet with falter. Visit 8 is the point where memories become so distant we can't make out their true meaning. The heavy use of echoes in this part cover most of the songs, leaving much to wonder what they were. The track names give a hopeless feel, with A Facade of Joy and Left in the Mist. Songs in this part carry heavy amounts of reverb to where notes and tones of the music begin to become blurry, with the memory from Visit 3 being more clouded and carrying a deep sadness of what life was like back then. The album cover shows a tall vase with branches and flowers coming out of the vase like veins. This shows that the patient's mind is slowly fading away, with each memory or petal drifting away like a tree in the winter. Visit 8 is actually the first of many. We'll see that a visit is split into 2 parts. The second part of Visit 8 is unlike the first part, where the use of heavy echo is not present, but the songs have an uneasy vibe to them. With the song Another Day Gone By, the instruments feel like they're suffering and in pain with every note they play. The album cover for this part of Visit 8 features the same vase from the first part, but now in a dark and empty space. This could likely represent the patient's loneliness while their mind deteriorates away.
In tonight's weather headlines, skies crash across New South Wales and Queensland. Tropical downpour, the monsoon delivers large rainfall totals, while the west sweats it out in hot conditions.
Visit 9 is the vacant attempt to reclaim the lost emotions in patients' memories while their mind begins to contort. These attempts are futile, leaving behind feelings of loss as if their past is fading away. Okay, can I just say something real quick? For those who have listened to the album already, are the visits seasonal? Because this visit feels like winter. Like, I could picture this being played over Charlie Brown lo-fi clips. I mean, just watch this.
I could show the world how to smile. I could be glad all the while. I could change the gray skies to blue if I had you.
And Visit 7 sounds like fall. If the Artifex meant for this, then well done, oh my god. I would be genuinely amazed if this was true. Anyways, back on topic. Visit 9 is honestly so emotional, with its sample choice being beautiful and perfect for attempts at reclaiming emotions. When I listen to this, I imagine the patient sitting there and staring off into space, thinking of what they can of their life. Its track titles match how I envisioned this visit, such as Abstractions of Myself, Clouded by Dismal Days, and Feelings of Fading Away. I don't really know what I'm looking at with the album cover Visit 9, so I'm not going to talk about it much. All I see is a sharp candlelight going through a board, but that's about it. Although I really enjoy the colors in this cover, matching perfectly well with the mood of this visit. There's one track in this visit that bewilders me. That track being the 5th one, Distortions Begin to Manifest. With heavy static and corrupted instruments, you can barely make out a tune, or a sound for that matter. The sounds of the corrupted instruments feel out of place, like they shouldn't be playing at that moment. The ending of the track feels never ending, most likely the patient's attempt to recollect the ending of a memory, only to sound even worse and more aggressive with each loop. Visit 10 is when the deterioration becomes much more harsh. With sounds drowning out in each ear, the songs have become a garbled mess of what once was. With track titles as damaging and depressing as sounds, like Notes of Broken Hope, Tattered Grieving Descent, and The Calm Before the Storm. The cover art is an array of street poles getting foggier in the distance. The roads the patient used to travel down in their childhood is now withering away. The patient tries to remember happier moments, but they come off very corrupted and violent. The tracks sound almost like they're in pain and agony, begging to stop. With track 5, A Star, I feel a sense of loneliness underlying beneath the shallow attempts of hope, with the track ending in a prolonged silence, leaving behind emptiness. These corrupted tracks and false hopes only continue to become worse and more depressing until... November 17th, 2003. This track is unnerving, with its heavy echoes and bells. The cover art has changed to a piece of paper surrounded by darkness. This is most likely the day of the diagnosis, which can be seen by the tracks further ahead. The track ends with a beyond terrifying scream of fog. Left in ruins, downward spiral into desolation, impending road ahead. This is how the patient feels after hearing the diagnosis. Knowing that their life is fading away, the patient sits there distraught. The album cover is a lone candle in a dark background, most likely representing the patient's time left with us. This part of Visit 10 is depressing, leaving a sense of loneliness and hopelessness for the future. With the track Reprieve to no avail, conveying the loneliness the patient is left with, a single horn accompanied by none other than deafening silence. And with the diagnosis, the patient begins to go through the 5 stages of grief, starting off with anger. The tracks in this part are very aggressive, with notes feeling harsh and forced. With tracks such as Indignant Ruptures and Sundowned Aggressions, we are left with exactly how the patient feels. I'm not 100% sure what the album cover is. It looks like a stress ball going through acupuncture. With acupuncture being a stress reliever, it makes sense why this is the album cover. The second part of Visit 11 is the second stage of grief, denial. The patient believes that the diagnosis is wrong and that everything is perfectly fine. Bargaining that's just regular memory and everyone forgets about the little things. With track titles such as There Is No Other Side and A New Definition of Self, saying otherwise. The tracks start off with contradicting bliss, only to lead into increasing worries. This is also the first of many we see the trend in further stages. The track Faulty Recall. Faulty recall is exactly what the title means. Faulty recall. The patient is experiencing an obstruction with their memories. Wires get crossed, and some memories are completely blocked out. Visit 12 is the patient's third stage of grief, depression. The reality of the patient's condition finally set in. This visit is very depressing, and the absolute pitfall where anyone can go. Knowing your whole life is about to be taken away from you, all your friends, family, are going to disappear from your mind, is an awful truth the patient holds. The tracks make this truth known, with plumes of grief fill the air, hope sinks into the grey mist, and absolute despair. The album cover is a lone bench sitting atop a steep edge, where the patient sits as the diagnosis cements the fact that their world will continue to crumble until they have nothing. The second part of Visit 12 focuses on the helplessness the patient is feeling, knowing everything will soon disappear. With track titles such as Drifting Further Away and Crying for Respite, it shows the patient's final grasps of hope that this will all get better. Here, we can see the second appearance of Faulty Recall. The song is barely recognizable, with heavy vinyl crackling. If you couldn't tell, this is actually a song from Visit 7, with parts of the song coming in and out in a violent and dark way. I can't really make out what the album cover is. I mostly just see ribbons, or the silhouette of a hummingbird. I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas. But either way, this part of the visit is the patient's cry for help. Caving in represents the patient giving up fighting the condition with no sense of improvement. The hope is all lost, and the patient sits there, waiting for their life and memories soon begin to fade away. The album cover changed only for this track, showing a statue of a feminine figure with no face. This could represent a close memory of the patient, maybe a love interest when they were younger. The patient is starting to forget the person they spent their entire life with, the person who brought them feelings and comfort in hard times. The patient's feelings or love for this person is starting to fade until they become unrecognizable to the patient. Confusion slowly started to become more apparent as memories deform, lasping into each other as mood swings and aggression are a common occurrence. Thoughts begin to distance themselves away from the mind as speech and cognition begin to break down. Visits are the most apparent in this part to keep the most important memories intact, though to no avail. Visit 13 is where deterioration and degradation start to intensify. As the description says, confusion becomes more apparent through lapsing tracks. The songs in this visit are distant and lap over each other. As each track ends, they end with a very unnerving fade-out, with tracks such as Times of Solemn Thoughts, Dismal Nights, and Tears Shed for Years to Come. We see the deterioration of the mind really become more and more apparent than the last visit. The album covers a steel ball rolling to its steep decline, a near direct resemblance of the beginning of the patient's descent to deterioration. Here, we can find a third faulty recall, and let me tell you, it's a jumbled mess of confusion and anger, with loud brass instruments and bells banging against the corners of your mind. This song echoes at all sides, sending pain and fear to the patient. Visit 14 is the hopeless struggle of the condition, as the patient tries to grasp what is left from the broken heap of memories, with tracks being more deformed and broken. Notes feel aimless and never-ending, with no sign of hope, with desolate tracks such as Unrest Past the Horizon, Mist and Embers Beyond, and dissociative mental wanderings, giving away their last embers of awareness till it turns to a depressive husk. The album cover is of a still watch to the left and a dual candlelight to the right. One of the candles is lit, which could mean the patient slowly losing the flame that burned inside their soul as their memories continue to deteriorate. One thing that sticks out to me in this visit is the fourth track, Dark Moments of the Night, starting off with a faint deteriorated piano playing notes of worry. As you get further into the track, you notice it start to change. The mood of the entire track has changed halfway through the song. The second half of the song could be a faint memory of bliss, untangling the strings of despair. When I hear this half of the track, I see a very faint memory of the patient in their childhood, playing with their friend in the backyard, before silently fading away into the light. faulty recall in this visit features mysterious notes and worrisome horns. None of the notes from the horns make sense, giving a sense of confusion in the memory. Visit 15 is the last of the blissful memories the patient once had before they all turn into longing drones, with track titles being the central point between coherent bliss and the destruction of the mind, with Overcast Tumult's Descent, Estranged from Myself, and Adrift. The third track, Moments Under Flames, as the description stated, are moments of aggression, with the instruments feeling tense and strained, with the song being cut off by roars of deep horns before looping the track. The fourth track, Definitions of Feelings, offering a continuation of the third song, with similar aspects such as the strained trumpets and blaring horns overtaking the track. The album covers the half of the tree trunk, with a clothing hanger punctured right through it. This cover could represent the final string of bliss in the empty head of degradation. The faulty recall in this visit cuts in and out, being confusing on what it once was. As the track goes on, it feels like different emotions come into play at random times during the track, to the point where the memory does not even make sense anymore. Further tracks such as Goner's Coda and Exitless Labyrinth being the final moments of bliss the patient can remember, with Exitless Labyrinth feeling like a memory of dancing with a beloved one. These beautiful moments of love begin to fade out further into the track, leaving behind a warming bright mist. Before we finish Visit 15, I would like to call attention to one track. I know I've already talked about a lot of tracks in this visit, but this one is too good to not pass up. That being the final track of Visit 15, Adrift. I've listened to my fair share of Everywhere at the End Time albums and fan albums. I have heard many people who have listened to the albums saying it made them feel existential. But very few tracks have made me feel existential, with Adrift being one of the 3 tracks. Its blaring distortions of someone we once knew, accompanied by heavenly chords. This track is actually a beautiful piece of music. Whenever I hear this track, I can't help but just stare off into space. The track is calming, disturbing, all wrapped up into a 4-minute track. This is the greatest form of mournful camaraderie I've ever heard. It creates the perfect bridge between reality and the stars above. These are the final moments of a memory before they finally give away to a staring void. Visit 16 is the slow descent from rioting depression to the empty void of nothingness. The echoes of memories we once knew flood our mind till the small tune becomes a drone that no longer seems familiar. With track titles wrapping the patient's memories in a blanket of anxiety and anguish, such as Silently Stealing Away, Masking Emotion, and Estranged by Unseen Hands. The album covers bar chimes being consumed by the ever-present darkness and void. On top of the bar chimes, you can see a statue. It's difficult to make out what it is at the top. My guess is either an ink dip with a pen, or the figure of a loved one. If you look closely at the statue, you can see it kinda resembles a dress. Could be a close person to the patient, or what's left of their memory of their partner. There's one track in this visit that sticks out to me, being the 6th track, Here. The track is entirely a drone that doesn't seem harsh or forced. It's a track that actually sounds quite peaceful, a rather blissful moment to distract the patient from their long-lasting, inevitable descent. The faulty recall in this visit being similar to already horrific post-awareness in other albums. Loud drones accompany this track with instruments that can vaguely be heard. In this visit, there are 2 faulty recalls. As the description said, faulty recalls and confusion become more apparent as the visits further progress. The first faulty recall is a dark pit of confusion, while the second is the corruption of one's speech. Once again, as in the description, speech and cognition will also begin to give way as the condition worsens. Visit 17 is the first step to the bridge between memories and mental decline, with haunting drones and jumbled fragments of bliss found in the heavy crackles of the caverns of the mind, with the patient undergoing an insomnia jolt of awareness that these next few years may be their last, with tracks highlighting these broken nights of woe, such as Vertigo, Benighted, and Pareto Principle. The album covers is single stage lights shining to the floor. And what is the stage light shining upon? Well, nothing. A single stage light shining on nothing. This represents the loss of importance of one's memories. A stage light in a play or a show is supposed to highlight what's important and where people should focus on. The stage light isn't shining on anything because there is nothing important to shine on. All the important memories the patient held dear to them, their friends, family, anything really, have been forgotten to the sands of time, leaving nothing left. Remember when I said Adrift was one of the 3 songs that made me feel existential? Well, that is not the only one in this album. The track Broken Cycles is another, with its haunting drone, still with a melodic feel. A powerful and blissful sounding song, even through the cold mist. This visit also has 2 faulty recalls. The first one being a jumbled up mess of sounds and crackling. Barely anything is recognizable, but you can still hear that there are notes playing. An emotion can barely be picked up on this track. I can't tell if this was a memory of joy or anguish. The second faulty recall is even more corrupted than the last. Unlike the first one, nothing is recognizable. The vinyl static is heavy in this track, blocking out any semblance of actual music. This track is the first of many, before the patient's turmoil into nothingness. Signs in the Sky, the final track of Visit 17, the most intact song we've heard in a while. This track shines with hope and joy, breaking through the mist like a spotlight on the show stage. Its wondrous tunes are uplifting even in these trying times of grief and disorientations. Enjoy these moments of bliss while you can, because they'll all eventually be lost to the sands of time. Visit 18 is the point where memories become so fragmented that they become too null and void to even try to remember. The patient loses track of time, as seconds turn into minutes, minutes turn into hours, and days become merged to where the patient does not know time is ticking even closer to the inevitable fall. With tracks such as Kudoclasm, Vanishing Point, and Dissociation Period, showing the beginning of the patient losing grasp of reality. I can't really tell what the cover art for Visit 18 is. My guess is either an ink dip or a needle, probably both knotted, on top of a high surface. If my guess for a needle is correct, I would say this represents the point where the patient has to take medication to soothe their declining condition. Although this is just a guess, and I could possibly be wrong about this. There is only one faulty recall in this visit, ending with faulty recall 10. This is also the track where the album cover changes. The cover art for this track looks like a revisit to Visit 2, but incredibly more dark and corrupted. The tree has lost all of its flowers, leaving an empty husk of what was once beautiful. This could represent the patient losing all of their peaceful and wonderful memories, leaving behind a horrifying void, with the patient hopelessly trying to grasp on any remaining sounds that were once familiar. This track is beyond unrecognizable, with the song aggressively cutting in and out. The static here is heavy, making their presence well known to where you can't even tell the memory's trying to be reclaimed. If you couldn't tell, I hardly could. This is beyond corrupted version of the song we heard in Visit 2, Sudden Displacement. The track becomes entirely lost, giving way to the void of nothingness. This is the start of memories becoming heavy drones that make their everlasting presence in the patient's mind. I think the Artifex's passion for creating this album started with the sudden jumps in between stages in other fan albums. They wanted to create an experience that seemed gradual and real. The album took its time to get familiar with you before its steep descent, and that's honestly amazing. One thing before we end this is, how is this album supposed to be listened to? Many people believe that Everywhere at the End of Time is meant to be listened in one sitting, but they're wrong. The album isn't meant to be listened to in one sitting. There's a reason why the Caretaker released the stages individually instead of all together, and it's because you are supposed to listen to one stage and then wait some time for the next one. Like visiting an elderly patient once every few months to check in on how their condition is going. Saying that the album is meant to be listened to all at once makes people think they can't listen to it, since they don't have the time of their day to listen to the music for 6 whole hours. I know people won't be sitting down listening to this entire album in one sitting for 9.5 hours. But then again, Wuhula did listen to all of Everywhere in the Beginning of Nowhere in one sitting. So, I don't know how you're going to spend your Tuesday night. You can tell there's a time skip because of the sudden jumps in Everywhere at the End of Time. In The Grand Decline, there are still jumps, but to a lesser extent. I would say the way to listen to this album is listening to one visit each day. You start on visit 1, next day you go to visit 2, and the day after that you go to visit 3, and so on. It's much easier for those who can't sit down and not only listen, but focus on the album for more than an hour. Each visit is about 30 to 45 minutes in length, so it's much easier to listen to if you have difficulties with the length of these types of albums. I'm not really sure why the Artifex decided to split this into Acts 2. Maybe because they've reached the limit on how much they can put on one Bandcamp page and have to make another one. For those who don't know, the Artifex uploads the visits for the Grand Decline individually on the Bandcamp page, instead of grouped up in a single YouTube video. So yeah, you can also check that out. For those wondering, oh, How do we know what stage we're on? As I said before, this album is only halfway finished. We have not gotten to post-awareness yet. Let's put this project on the 6-stage scale. This is, in my guess, on stages in the Grand Decline. Visits 1 to 3 being stage 1, visits 4 to 12 being stage 2, and 13 onwards is stage 3. The reason I believe this is how the stages are is because of the sudden mood change in visit 4 and the depressive state in visit 12. Usually in Everywhere at the End of Time fan albums, stage 2 is where the mood darkens due to the realization of their condition becoming worse as the days continue. The final track of visit 12, Caving In, is most likely the patient giving up and accepting the fact that their worsening mental condition will continue to degrade. Visits 4 through 12 focus on the emotional state the patient is in with faint distortions of memory. Visits 13 and onward focus more on the degradation of the memories. Another pattern I see to know what stage we're on is the first track titles for Visit 1, 4, and 13. The Grand Hall opens wide, the great doors begin to close in, and these great corridors echo on. I would say, on the scale of where we are compared to Everywhere at the End of Time, I would say we are currently somewhere between F7 and F8, with the memories becoming drones longing for release in Visit 18. Although this is just a guess and I could be wrong. Looking back on the visits in this review, I have found very important details that may have not been noticeable listening the first time. The story this album tells is a story of tragedy, loss, hope, and despair. Describing this album doesn't show the album's full story. It is an experience I have not seen from any other fan album, including the original inspiration. The Artifex aim to create the most detailed and drawn-out experience of dementia, and they have done a phenomenally well job. For those looking for an album that feels original and creative, The Grand Decline is an amazing choice. I cannot recommend it enough. It is definitely worth your time. Please go support Phi Sigma and their projects. It is literally criminal that this album doesn't get enough recognition as it deserves. Thank you for watching, and I cannot wait to see what this album has in store for us next.